Association Network and the LA Taxi Workers Alliance was very alive and present. It was very alive and present. The Patriot Act was also, but before that, the 1990s. And the time of the great champion of liberalism, Bill Clinton, we saw what happened, how things were gutted completely to the ground, 92 bill, 94 rules bill, when Biden was the chair of the Judiciary Committee. And we see what happened. And then the 1996 laws, what it did with immigration, effective death penalty, anti-terrorism laws, and various other things, the Welfare Reform Act. So, when we're talking more about, just the impact of surveillance and low-income people and poor folks as well, that's a whole conversation to be had. But that's where, just then I made a transition and helped found the Stop LGBT Spying Coalition. And I just want to start with a little bit about where we are today and what I thought, and talking to Shireen, who's been incredibly supportive and, just getting a lot of guidance from them. We talked about that I'm not organizing, developed, but was really kind of taken by that Bart Heights is this we talked about it, that they had to bring these oxygen tanks to keep people alive. Take over 50% of general funds. Why is it? I mean, what happened to $1.36 billion? Which is like 0.000, infinite amount of zeros, and some 2 or 3% of what the budget is. So what I wanted to do was to speak about where we are today, as of April 12th, and what we are doing in Los Angeles, and how this has created a whole ruckus in the system. So this is the website that we released on March 17, 2023, just about 4 weeks ago, this coming Friday. We're getting death threats. Because what we did was we posted the pictures of 9,310 LAPD officers on this website. And I'll just open it up to show you what's going on. There are lawsuits going on. We got sued a week and a half ago. The Police Protective League, which is the lobbying arm for the cops, sued the city, sued the chief. So this is a site, this is a project that we started back in 2014. And the project is that Watch the Watchers was that we go, and it's sort of like a surveillance and advanced version of Cop Watch. That we put the cameras on the cops and monitor their movements, monitor what equipment they bring, monitor the weaponry that they have, and how is surveillance taking place. We released a video in 2015 in which we even outed an undercover cop and on a May Day march in 2015, and the video is Watch the Watchers, They Lie. Then we released another video in 2017, and the title of that one is Watch the Watchers, They Still Lie. So in that vein, one of the journalists, and I want to honor the work of Ben Camacho, he's a journalist with Knock.LA, he had filed for public records. The California Public Records Act was legislated in 1968, so it's been there. It's like the state version of FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, and asked for the LAPD's photographs. Well, it went to court, they had to be sued, and then finally, through the photos were released, and he provided those photos publicly. Now, these are the photos and information that was made public by the city of public employees working for a public institution through another public office, which is the city attorney's office. So you would think that it's gone through its own vetting process. And their roster and all was not the first time they had released, because there's a history of them releasing information on 13,000 cops, including sworn and non-sworn civilian employees, and on and on and on. So what this does is, and this is like 3.5 weeks old, so let's say I just want to check a job and searches, so these things are done. There's a whole list of, all of these. I don't want to say the word jobs, but anything is expected of them. Because they do. In current favor for this is how they criminalize poverty and gender. So this is what we published.
Yes. I have my back pain. I can sit here back. I can sit on the chair. I have back issues.
And then we also published.
I can sit here.
So now all of this is 100%.
I have some back issue. Can you give me this one? I put here.
But it was also important.
I give you back. Just hold the phone. Just this. Give me 1 minute. This one I give you back. I just hold the phone here. Huh?
Yes. He was hired in 2005, and he's making $225,000.
Oh, this is Runat, this one, the black one. I give you back, just I put the phone here.
$100,000 salary,
Yeah, water bottle here.
where the teacher's salary, that my daughter is a high school teacher at the university, and her starting salary is $49,000. You know, and these are for nourishing our thought process, nourishing our creativity versus these are the folks who are completely out of that instruction and just effing up our creativity, messing up our communities, murdering our loved ones on the street every day, and having mass apparatus of surveillance, spying, and infiltration. So, just wanted to share that. And here I'll go back to the here, so sorry, here, so sorry.
I have package.
Okay, so that's our logo. This was Jason's video. I made that back in 2011. So the story begins that I start talking to our comrades who we've been building a bit of our police brutality and state violence for many, many years. So the main premise for the issue was that where should Stop Any Peace Fighting Coalition be located? And coming off of South Asian Network, you know, just being on the front lines, looking at how it was impacting the Muslim South Asian area and various Asian communities, but knowing the history of policing as well, that this is the current face of the other. This is the face of the other, which has historically been here, because of faith based thing, and then Muslim jihad and all of that, and just really popularizing that conversation. It was critical that knowing that it's going to circle back, and it's going to impact the communities that it has traditionally always impacted, Black and brown and indigenous bodies, on whom these policing tactics have been experimented, on whom the bodies have been laboratory to really build on. So it was evident, and really want to thank Los Angeles Leadership Action Network, our family, one of the most incredible movement builders on race and poverty in Los Angeles and downtown. So it was a natural extension that we would be our home. And from there, we started understanding that, okay, how do we build that narrative around surveillance? So rather than parachuting in and announcing that, yo, a new organization is coming to town, who's with us, right? It was more or less like, how do we even understand the vocabulary on the street and how people are experiencing surveillance? So we spent a good 6 to 8 months just talking to people, Skid Row residents, like, what does being suspicious mean to you? Talking to day laborers, like, what does see something, say something mean to you? Talking to queer trans folks, like, what does being a deviant body as it is, like, mean to you as surveillance? Talking to undocumented youth coming out of cages with gang terrorists and gang convictions. So it really did several things. One, help us and guide us in checking our language, vocabulary in our language. Well, I'm not speaking with one person, and then third, and then fourth, whatever the whole, the amendment soup is that's constantly flooded. That's not even in law school. Sitting in the academy, this is what the very sort of constantly oriented word. But this was about, rather than how the law looks at it, and rather than them telling us what the impact is, for us it was critical that our community's history is our truth. Their lived experience is our truth. So we have to build our power based on that lived experience, based on that history as well. Not just because that the ACLU says it's a major price. By the way, we have organizing against the ACLU as well. So we've exposed them a lot of things that they have done to harm the community because of the space that they use. So that's been going on as well. So what came out of that was that rather than looking at it through invasion of privacy, it was that surveillance is a methodology that how is race, poverty, and suspect bodies are controlled through that way. Because ultimately it's about blame. It's about the control. So that's what we learned and we understood, that which helped us then really expand our understanding that the term invasion of privacy and surveillance several things. Number one, it doesn't recognize that this is a methodology with the intent to cause harm. It's intentionally done. These are, when we say targeted communities, well, how are they targeted? It doesn't just happen in thin air. There's a whole process and structures and systems and legislation and funding and accounting and the court system and the prosecutors and everything, how communities are targeted. So where does information gathering and data collection play? That was really what helped us understand it. And secondly, that if we stay stuck with the invasion of privacy, it limits our freedom. Because then we are looking for remedies to the court system. That, okay, somebody's First Amendment is violated. And yes, it is there. But is it our primary tool or primary vehicle? Or that is a tool that we use in a very effective way when it comes to that? But the tool really is, or the process really is, that collectively learning and building that power together to then have movement towards, in our journey towards the abolition of the system. It wasn't about tinkering here, reforming here. And then I also want to just, just preface that I'm at NYU on this campus, that academic complicity is huge. Huge. The academy is so deeply complicit in the violence that we have. You have on your campus the policing project, that people like Barry Friedman and all of that, who act as a shock absorber for the system. They act as a shock absorber for the system because policing is about counterinsurgency. And reform is basically just kind of provides a little band-aid and helps rebrand that state violence more than anything else. So that's what, so it's also a call to action, like, just tell those folks to just stop. Stop, just kind of supporting and pushing more and more reformist conversation and expanding harm in our communities. Just stop. Don't claim the space, don't parachute into our communities, and claim to represent the folks out with the Axons of the world, or the tasers of the world, or the shock spotters of the world, or this of the world. No, it is up to the community how they're fighting back. So then So then we're like, okay, what are we building this on? So the thing being that what are our guiding values? And these became our guiding values. These were collectively developed by the community. That what we are looking at and dealing with is not a moment in time, but a continuation of history. It didn't start with the FBI, it didn't start with the NSA. It goes on and on and on. And of course, I want to honor Simone Brown's work on Mark Matters and surveillance to slavery that talks about lantern laws and other things as well. And there's a whole history there. So surveillance, spying, infiltration is as deep in American tradition as raging war across the world. So that is just part and parcel of that. The creation of the other, and how historically the face of the enemy is created, and then it is paraded. Hollywoodization, the savage native, they are not capable of killing the land. The criminal black, that just by presence, there's criminality. The evil Latino, the manipulated Asian, in 1966 was the past. We were in 1966 the Japanese and German concentration camps. The argument was that persons of Japanese ancestry contain enemy race blood, hence inherently civil. So it is something that these are the arguments against the terrorist Muslim, the terrorist South Asian, deviant trans. But it was also critical for us to bring it together because when there's so many others, there's a lot of power there. So how do the others of the world get active? How do folks come together and build that collective power? So that was critical. Desensationalize the rhetoric of national security. Bring it down. The Russians are coming, the anarchists are here, the hordes are at the border, and this is the terrorists are amongst us right now. So to desensationalize that, no, this is a part and parcel of your daily policing. Daily policing, to sanitize the policing. Places like the policing project, they do that. Like, just the acceleration profiling, let's put it on the people in college see something. Right? And this happened when the Office of Director of National Intelligence was ODNI, was establishing the parameters for the Suspicious Activity Reporting Program. That's exactly the community-based groups and community-based in the office who have created this national security and counterterrorism. So there's a lot of publicity that is going on in the nonprofit sector. And then, of course, major and human rights. And I also wanted to say that not the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was, hijacked by elements. It's really the human experience is our purpose. And myself as a virtually human is my claim my right to be as I am. And of course, just what you can do, what it looks like, and all that. So that's what. Then a little snapshot of understanding the history of surveillance, like people created blanket laws. They were in New York, people know that, so in 1706, this was around Washington. There were blanket laws in New York City, and I just sort of like maybe exact word a little different. That if you were an enslaved black or indigenous person, and after dark, if you're out in the street, you have to walk with a candle, with your lantern in your hand, to identify yourself as the other, so people can keep an eye on. So that's, just going back, slave patrols, black codes. So there's a whole, so red spots is really critical in the surveillance field, especially police surveillance. Are people familiar with red spots? So red spots were before there was FBI, before there was anything going on. And it goes to low-wage workers as well, because red squads were created by the Chicago Police Department after the 1886 strike at Haymarket. This was a Haymarket strike, which led to the creation of May Day. So there's a reason why people celebrate the National Workers' Solidarity Day, that is May Day. So the Chicago Police Department, immediately in the aftermath of the Haymarket strike, formed a covert operation called the Red Squads, which then NYPD incorporated, LAPD incorporated, Philadelphia Police Department, on and on. So this is really critical that surveillance, rather than looking at the FBI first, because they came where? Local law enforcement is always on the front lines of surveillance, spying, and infiltration. They work, it's a multi-agency operation, but it's the LAPD or the NYPD who does it first, and then the FBI comes in, and other support systems come in as well. Another piece we had to understand was that okay, how does surveillance happen? How is data collected? And there is an operation of practice in policing that started out of England, the UK by the Canton Constabulary, called intelligence threat. And it's critical because New York was one of the first places that started it. It started about 40 years ago, and the main premise was behavioral surveillance and data mining. That I'm observing you and I'm making a note of that. And this is what Comstat model that Bill Bratton is so called for was built on. Back in the mid-1990s, Comstat model, the BG guys and all that stuff, that's a whole separate history by itself. So, but the third bullet point, the big bullet point is critical. The process involves planning outcomes an agency wants to achieve. So if the agency wants to achieve to criminalize young black and brown men and put gang injunctions in place and put them in gang databases, then observed behavior comes into play. There are 12 elements that if you have just a sign, or maybe it should be a gang tattoo, or you're wearing loose shorts, right? All of these behaviors are then criminalized to further codify them within the system as a criminal and all that. So that's what really becomes critical. So that's why this is a journey I'm sharing with you, that how did we get here? That immediately in the aftermath of 9/11, there was a commission established. And then the 9/11 commission came back with a report, and the main premise was that information was not being shared within various agencies. The NYPD was working on misinformation, FBI was doing its own thing, they were doing their own thing, ATF was doing their own thing, DEA. So then Congress passed this law, which is really a very critical law in the last, or at least where we are currently, the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004, which mandated, among many things, it created the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which brought all the intelligence agency under one umbrella, but also mandated the presidential, the executive branch, to create an umbrella of massive information sharing environment. And I'll show you a slide where information can be seamlessly exchanged between various agencies. So that's why it becomes very critical. And one of the programs was the Suspicious Activity Reporting Program that was launched in 2006. And then the LAPD was the first local law enforcement agency to incorporate that in March of 2008. It is one of the most critical laws of surveillance-based laws that we have in the country, which still just drives everything. From predictive policing, of course, broken windows and all that was before that, but behavior is central to it. And if you look at those quotes, would you mind reading that? Observe behavior.
Observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning of criminal and/or terrorist activity.
So what the heck is that? I've asked many lawyers and various people too, like, what the heck is that? Observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operation planning. That I'm observing your behavior, which indicates to me that you are thinking of doing something. Right? I mean, this is like, my mom would do that. I think you're going to steal that banana. No, mom, I'm not going to steal that. But it's almost like odd that how your behavior becomes criminalized. Especially, the issue of an incredibly poor, amazingly poor, predominantly black population observed behavior, because broken windows and unleashed violence against that community already started in 2005, and kudos to Los Angeles Protection Network for putting a fight against them. So then we mapped out the architecture of surveillance. So public records to our research and identified things like, suspicious activity reporting program, intelligence gathering guidelines, predictive policing, and various other tools that we use them. Now you would hear me not use the word surveillance technology very much, because I don't. Because what that word technology takes away is that analog surveillance has always been there. Whether these were slave patrols or lantern law or observed behavior, it is human-to-human surveillance is the primary way that this is how ideologies are maintained. This is how patriarchy works. This is how, the grand patriarch keeping an eye on any odd movement of anybody else. So that's where, just looking at these things, but yet at the same time, because technology has advanced, and one thing that would happen is that the law enforcement agencies have incorporated counterterrorism programs in their daily operations so much, and with data processing, information is moving, and they have these tools. So yeah, we can use the technology here, but ultimately, it is analysts who are picking and choosing to predictive policing that, okay, which would be the hot spots, which neighborhood are they going to be patrolling? So that's where this information goes. This is what I was talking about, what we call the stop issue. And this is what we have mapped out, that the information sharing environment is so vast that streams of information are moving between the public sector, private sector, law enforcement, you name any sector of that this is how information is being shared, this is how it's moved, and people are being traced and tracked and monitored and literally being stalked on their daily lives. For example, we mapped out and we're getting ready to release, and that's why it becomes really important as well. This is Stop State comes in. This is how information is shared by the Department of Children and Family Services and the Child Protective Services. This is how information moves within that system. We're actually getting ready to release a report in a couple of weeks, which is part 2 of our previous report, that how surveillance is the primary vehicle. And how, again, one of our Victoria Pulpit will help write that report, and they talk about that Child Protective Services is broken windows policing. Because they go and try and hunt, just with it. That, okay, whose baby are we going to take? And we have to see that the way people are sharing their experiences. This is another way. This is like the housing and urban development is a part of this structure. This is how DMV operates. This is how they move within the system. So in essence, understanding all of these things was really critical for us to even build our narrative and build our fight as well. This is, for example, our work that we did during predictive policing. Again, just honoring everybody's work, we were able to successfully dismantle the LAPD's predictive policing program. But while we did that, it was important that what is the ecology? Who are the players under which this thing is operating? So decentering, and this is just the final thing, there's a whole presentation about it, Because predpol, or the algorithm, was developed by a professor of anthropology. Okay, so what does anthropology have to do with good? Of course, anthropology has everything to do with policing, of the other as well. But how did it happen? Well, they were initially given a grant by the Department of Defense in 2005 because they said we could predict insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan. So just like everything else, it gets monetized and progress we made. So Professor Grant Thing, again, academic publicity, Professor Andrea Bertozzi, Professor Emeritus of Mathematics, and all of these credentials that I can even spell it as for. So this is what it said that okay, the DoD funding. The Academy created. The Department of Justice is now giving money to that. Then the city and the real estate developers are monetizing of this thing. The city is very complicit, where the mayor there, the former mayor Eric Garcetti, just talked about predictive policing in the state of the city address in 2019 that this is the best thing that ever has been started. Right? That kind of is true. Whereas now, once it was dismantled, the chief of the police comes back and he says, well, this was an experiment. Really? People being murdered in the community was an experiment. People being harassed and intimidated and threatened was an experiment. So that's what they do. But it was really critical that in what kind of ideology is involved. What is the institutions that are involved in it? How is it operationalized? And what is happening to the community out there? Here's Brantham's quote about predictive policing, about creating an algorithm. He says that criminal offenders are essentially hunter-gatherers because he based his theory on the removal of stone by hunter-gatherers on the Tibetan Plateau. Now, I went to school in Pakistan. I didn't go to school here, and I cheated on my BA finals just because I checked that box. But somebody with such, meager amount of formal education, like, what the heck are you talking about? Right? Like, what does Tibetan Plateau have to do with South Central Los Angeles? Where are we going with this thing? And they forage for opportunities to commit crimes. The behaviors that a hunter-gatherer uses to choose a wildebeest versus a gazelle are the same calculations a criminal uses to choose a Honda versus a Lexus. This is, I see it has shaking and going like, of course it's effed up. It's as messed up as it can be. But there's a lot of money to be made because then predpol went private, and it's a corporation. But since we outed them and exposed them, they changed the rebranded to Geolytica. Like, a more sanitized version of this kind of thing. And this is the algorithm that they use. This is an ETAS version, which is an earthquake predictor model. This is the algorithm that is being used by policing the predpol and all sectors, and things have kind of just moved on, but it goes to show that where we are and how things are moving. So what we did was like, okay, as we saw that algorithm ecology slide, but we got there because we're like, wait a minute now, where is Skid Row? There's a lot of people being killed over here. This started especially on March 2nd, residents there, Charlie Africa was murdered, was literally pulled out of the tent and shot by 5 LAPD officers. Okay. So we filed to see like if that was a predictive policing hotspot. And we filed for 2 different sets of public records, 2015 and 2018. And what we saw was that where I'm moving my cursor now, this is Skid Row. And we're located right here in Madison 6th. This is Skid Row, but you won't see very many hotspots in Skid Row. But what you see is that the new downtown is where all this almost looks like a cumulonimbus cloud, that like a thunderstorm is going to happen. These are the hotspots. So they created this digital boundary around Skid Row because to make sure that none of these undesirables walk across the dirty divide, as LA Kent calls it, from Los Angeles Street into the new downtown, where these penthouse apartments are going to go, where all these fancy businesses are. Because this is where patrolling happens, in these hotspots. I'm going to wrap it up in about a couple minutes. I don't want to very fast over. But I just wanted to share that. And this is also another Operation Laser Operator, where they say that the program is analogous to laser surgery, where a trained medical doctor uses modern technology to remove tumors. So tumors are the people. That's what they're saying. And this was another consultant to the LAPD, Craig Yeshiva. And this is an official LAPD poster. This is, you see that little map back there, that is South Central Los Angeles. And they show this laser beam going through and burning the neighborhood out there. So that is how people are thought of. Hunter-gatherers, wildebeest gazelle, and then laser program, Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration Program. And this is where I just wanted to share that because it is also what they do, what they know called social cohesion and collective efficacy. And what are the factors that maintain social cohesion, right? And what you see is that this is all official justice institute strategies, we got it from DOJ, that older residents perceive more collective efficacy and social cohesion than younger residents. Residents who use income assistance perceive lower level of collective efficacy. Women perceive lower levels of social cohesion. Residents who own their home have higher perceptions of social cohesion. Residents who use neighborhood resources, I mean, this is as garbage as it gets. They're taking the humanity out of it, and of course, it's about the capitalist system, so you're measured by the choice you have and what materials you have. But this is what is done. And this was another chart. And if you look at these are like they have graded people who are a threat to that social cohesion. And if you look at the bottom one, it talks about, and mostly like African American, 42%, female head of household, that single moms who are black are the biggest threat to social cohesion in our society. Are the biggest threat because they are the ones, they are creating these conditions. And, you know, when the language gets so vulgar, like, you know, one can just sit there and you're talking because, you know, up to the late 1970s and even early 80s, when LAPD would go and take reports in South Central Los Angeles, they would use symbols of the letters NHI. No humans involved. They would take that documented report like that. So that's how, you know, when you're looking at these things. And this is how they map this thing. So, you know, I just want to, I'm going to stop there. I mean, I think I'd love to have some conversation because there's a lot to be said, there's a lot to be shared. You know, how we have mapped it out. So, you know, I hope this was helpful. We want to continue to build, and again, my call to action is that academic publicity is really eating us up. Policing projects and various of these centers and all of that, who get so much money, are the scribes for the empire. They are the scribes for this virus. So we got to fight back and we got to make it now. So thank you.
Thank you again for that wonderful presentation. We will open up the questions to the floor. So if you have questions, please.
I mean, obviously, we're like here in the academic setting, and you talk a lot about academic complicity. What do you think are like the most effective ways to push back against academic complicity? Is it different than the strategies that you would use to highlight Fred Paul or other organizations that are maybe more involved directly in policing efforts?
I mean, I think we look at like all those organizations around who's the most impacted. And of course, community is the most impacted. But I think in academic settings, we also have the first process is orientation. That's what's happening in academic settings. So the students are the most impacted. What directions they will go, what information are they absorbing, how that orientation is taking place. I mean, we talk about it, and again, General Milton, my dear friend and brother, we talk about it, this is the law school, that how the Constitution itself is a blueprint for oppression. So how do we then understand the impact of the legal codes and the way these our lives are codified and run and driven? So I think in this case, I would say it is, and in the last year or so, I do remember we kind of supported the students. This was NYU Law School students who called out, and I saw some smiles as I was talking about the policing project, who really called out the policing project. So really thank you for doing that. And I think it's that kind of organizing but I fully understand as well that the threats that they have. Because these schools have a lot of power. They have a lot of connection. They can mess up people's tenure. They can mess up people's careers. They can just target people on a good volume. The track you trace, it's like the soccer state, because they're part of the soccer state. But it is about, like, you know, how, what I would suggest is for the students that what is the learning process? What is that collective learning? We get a lot of students that here in South American Spine Coalition. They are a part of the community. There's no boundary between somebody that you're a law student or you're this. You are a part of the community. Now take that responsibility and roll with the community. Understand, build that relationship. And then bringing it back to the academic settings and challenging and questioning that. Or if not, then okay, how is one constantly fighting that one-way orientation and reorienting oneself and share? So it's a process of unlearning and learning, right? So I think just what we did, what I did personally in my own life, because of having my male privilege and various other things, what has been that constant journey, the process of unlearning as well? But it's one of those, there's no magic pill or science to that, and I think it's more or less like our own human self, how do we bring it to that?
Thanks for being here. I'm interested in hearing kind of in a best case scenario. Thanks for being here. I'm interested to hear in a best case scenario, kind of a framework of what you would envision a city like Los Angeles doing to respond to crimes in the community if you started your own framework from scratch.
Absolutely. So obviously there's no one answer to that. I mean, and when we talk about abolition, sometimes it's made into this very sensational thing. I mean, abolition is a basic idea about ending harm. That's it. I mean, of course, it's easier said than done, but it is about ending harm. And then the tools that are being used to harm people. That's at least what I have understood in my life, that, that's what abolition is all about. So now, the person, when you look at, and then we look at the crime data of the other TV, for example, overwhelmingly, the crime, which is a social construct to begin with, right? So crime is survival crime. People who are just like, just people going in, moms going in and snagging a few diapers here. Just taking them a loaf of bread. I mean, that is most of the time that crime happens. So, that what comes to the condition on the ground. Then what I talked about, that why is the LSPD getting $3.4 billion besides all the federal funds and the grants and this fund and that thing and that thing? And why is the Youth Development Office getting $1.2 billion? Shouldn't it be the other way, that the youth should be the major investment in our communities? And I again want to honor Youth Justice Coalition, another awesome group in Los Angeles, who really the youth came together. These youth are coming out of gang databases and cages and all of that, who created a whole, first they called it 1% and then a 5% campaign, that if we took 5% of the money from the prosecutorial branch, the education branch, and the policing, the sheriffs, and the jail system, it will create enough money a year to have 25,000 youth jobs, 500 centers for youth, and on and on and on. So now the conditions on the ground, first of all, and of course I'm not saying that what other people have not said before, but here's the response to this thing. Bill Bratton made a speech at the National Institute for Justice in 2007. And he made this sort of like an order in Bratton's way, that he says, basically he was saying that I'm done with this whole thing about the intergenerational poverty and the reasons for crime and racism and institutionalized racism. It's in a very eugenics way, because policing is about eugenics as well. In a very eugenics way, it says it is about behavior. So I challenge social scientists to start rethinking how are they approaching this thing. So the one way is to really, in a very eugenics way, top-down way, to just think that people are inherently, that's why we love it. Right? So policing is not the answer. Policing has never been the answer. Has never been the answer. Because what we have is the response to homelessness is policing. The response to youth is policing. The response to this is policing. Now the response to COVID is policing. Everything is done through the policing thing. So how are we then coming together and creating those conditions on the ground? And people are doing that. People are kind of building these kind of communities in LA. That are kind of building towards that. And yes, it's just abolition is not an elite button. And like I said, it's a multi-generational journey. But the least we can do is where we are in our generation, in this moment in time, that how are we building that collectively? How are we building that knowledge? So I didn't give you a very direct answer like A, B, C, and D. It's not a bullet point answer, but it's just thinking more. And then how are we really understanding, especially for law students who are studying law and order and disorder, because I always think about what is order? What does that even mean? Like we start talking about disorder. That is also intentionally created too. That it requires a lot of reorientation and understanding, and really, again, being in the capitalist system, where are the resources going? Where are the resources going? How people are being starved of that materiality as well, the basic survival is at stake. I mean, being in Skid Row, again, the resilience and the dignity that you see in people under the most harshest conditions. And what has happened is that through now data-driven policing, through all of these predictive policing and hotspots and labor zones and anchor points and the neighborhood engagement area, all of this, soup that it is for rebranding, the ground beneath people's feet has been criminalized. Because 4118 of Los Angeles Municipal Code doesn't allow you to sit, stand, and lay down, or just take a pause in the city of Los Angeles to criminalize unhoused people. Crime prevention through environmental design is all over the place. I don't know if people have heard of that. Where literally clear cutting of land happens to provide that when occupying 360 degree feet. That's why when you go to South Central Los Angeles and in Skid Row, there are hardly any trees. And then the pavement in the summertime, the asphalt gets to 125 degrees. Same thing happens in Skid Row. So you're constantly being punished, but there's an intention behind it. That you, and this is used in immigration law, it's called attrition through enforcement, that people self-deport themselves. You create conditions on the ground. So I think that's what it goes back to. I started out by speaking about the intent to cause harm. And yes, we can talk about it all day long, but just speaking to the communities and the experiences and their experiences and the impact is intentional. So I think in that, so how are we building that power to dismantle these systems? And it's a long journey, way after my generation to come, but we will win. I mean, we will, because we have to be on this path, and we are obligated to each other and ourselves. I just have to.
So I had an interesting question about your experience. So much of difficulties I feel communities have encountered is just lack of visibility and a lack of being able to access some specific information about what tools police are using and specific strategies that are made opaque. And there's a lot of issues with FOIA and state-specific versions of FOIA of police departments just not complying even with court orders. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you use, I guess a combination of legal and more organizing-based methods to sort of compel disclosures or just to get information.
I'm so glad you asked that question because even filing for public record is a major organization. So we, with all due respect to all the lawyers, and there should be one of our lawyers too, I'll defend all the cases. We try to keep lawyers out of putting public records in question. Because for us, it's not a discovery, it's about storytelling. It's about how do we do almost like an MRI of a system, of an institution. I'll give you an example of our public records communities. Community came together, just like we're sitting, and people, it's getting wrong over there. Like, okay, what do you want to know? And somebody said, I want to know what are they thinking about this thing? Where is the thought? How do you find out what they think? I want to know how much staffing they have. I want to know how people need harm. I want to know, how much money is being paid. So we knew that the LAPD got a grant from DOJ, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, to start their policing program. So we're like, okay, how are they thinking? Let's get a copy of their grant request. Let's get a copy of their proposal. Because obviously in that proposal, they would have written something that why do they want to do this program? So please give us the money to do that, right? So that's where the story begins of fighting for public records. So that's really critical. It has to be community driven and collectively done, right? I mean, there are some that you said a question like, okay, they can do that, but all these programs, it has to be collective. We just found another one for social media surveillance. Community sitting there, we had a TV like this, somebody's typing the public record and doing and so on. So this is a real people's public record. Now the response from that. We have filed 8 public records lawsuits against the LAPD since 2016. We have won 6 and 2 are in process. We've never lost public records lawsuit because they play these games. We've got secret lists from them. And they played this claim of national security exemption, unusual circumstances, exigent circumstances, burdensome, the typical language in quotes and unquotes and whatever you read all the goddamn time. So obviously we're like, no, please don't give us this bullshit. you know, this is what games that you institutionally play, we're not gonna let go. So we kept at them, and then finally, like, okay, let's file a lawsuit. Well, okay, then let's go to court. Okay, so that's happened with the lawsuit. The photos were finally released, and we have a lawsuit still pending, because when we filed for the roster, they refused to release the heightened waiver. We're like, what do you mean you don't want to release it? How many employees there are with anybody? I mean, who else than a police person, a public employee, that anybody of us would ever get in contact with? I hardly met somebody from the water and power department, except like I get a damn bill. Right. So I think people have a right to know that who these cops are, what do they look like, and I can wait. Okay, I mean, you can even draw a reference by standing next to this table that so that's one of the ways that we do it. Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, why do you get it like just
Okay, yeah, this is more, I was wondering, does the Watchers database, does that include, I don't know what the alley version of the CRB is, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, does it include complaints against officers, or is that noted?
So, one of the things that happened was that state law was passed in California around reporting officers' conduct. So that's that. The other big place is the complaint process as well. So we will be in the process. So think of this, I mean, it'll be 4 weeks this February as a living agreement, because additional things will be added to that as well, including the misconduct history of that, including report form and what that looks like. So it's definitely very much in the works. And I just want to add one thing, that the LAPD itself has 8 other public records where they have published these rosters themselves. So because we are doing it, so they're all up in arms about it because they put photos in there. They publish photos on the regular. Like, you know, here's some officers on a motorcycle, here's some officer running paper to Las Vegas race, and gee, how glorious these men and women in blue are. So they just want to glorify Hollywood. And of course, we're talking about lawsuits. Yes, sir.
Thank you for a great presentation. My question is that the law enforcement agencies are using, they are doing much using drones and robots for surveillance their own people. And the other question is that these same law enforcement agencies are killing people around the globe through using their counterintelligence and stuff like this. How are you enforcing all this? Recently, they killed one of Pakistan's top journalists, Ashad Sharif.
Absolutely. So, you know, your first question, absolutely. License plate readers, body cameras, drones, you know, all these various tools are information. We were really sort of like, you know, people called us out because in 2015 or 2014 when body cameras were introduced, we were the only ones who published a report. Like now, this is a major surveillance and information gathering device. And that's exactly what has happened, that LAPD has now homologized it, and it's an old version of what happened when they're talking about body cameras. So that's absolutely, keep on exposing them and fighting. As far as policing is concerned, I always say that the biggest export the United States has is state violence. And I would include the weaponry and the weapons and all of that too. So these are tools of violence that are exported. And the LAPD and New York Police Department are on the front lines of putting it. I'll give you an example. That the Marine Corps had 70 individuals assigned to the LAPD in the 2000s as the Iraq War was going on. They were assigned to the LAPD to cruise with them to find out how LAPD was waging an urban counterinsurgency warfare on its own citizens, particularly black and brown people in South Central Los Angeles. What were the counterinsurgency tactics that they were using? And that's exactly what the U.S. Marine Corps then used those tactics in unorganized, in Iraq. El Salvadorian paramilitary squads in the 1980s were trained by the enemy for urban guerrilla warfare and all of this stuff. And of course, we can't set aside Israel when we talk about global violence and the genocide that is happening right now of Palestinian people. When Rio Olympics was going on, just in 2004 or whatever it was, and the World Cup was going to happen over there, that's exactly what was going on, that the LAPD was invited there. LAPD has advised Abu Dhabi to release it. And we know how violent they can get, right? So absolutely right. And then I'll come back to, remember that soccer state chart that I shared with you, right? So there are various versions in there of international information sharing, right? The National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, and then various other agencies as well. So this absolutely, this is a global issue. This is a global network of the stalker state, which then proceeds to engage in violence. And I know I've been saying a lot of this thing, but I also want to emphasize that our goal is to build power and not paranoia. Because this can also be like, what's going on? And it is there. It is very much there. There's no denying that. But then what do we do about it? Either we sit there and talk about it, or like, people here as we are in our own spaces, bring it back to our communities, bring it back to our families, and we do our own information sharing and do that collective learning and how we really do our lives. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. That was absolutely wonderful. We are honored to have you. For those of you interested,
I have one question also.
well, I will say, so we do have
I'll
another,
come to you, Ben.
we do have another panel in about 10 minutes, in which Hamid will be joining us that will more so focus on the surveillance state and how it impacts low-wage individuals and minorities. And then later this evening at 4 p.m., we will have a panel focused on reproductive justice and the surveillance state and how it impacts those seeking to have abortions or who can become pregnant in a post-Dobbs era. So